Xenogenders. What are they? Where do they come from? And are they a threat to our very way of life? No. The answer to that last question is a loud and resounding no. Xenogenders, for all the shit said about them via the media, aren't all that new in how they approach gender. All they've done is taken the way we've classically used gender to express ourselves and built upon it in new and creative ways, and that's what we're going to be talking about. The truth about xenogenders, as well as neogenders and neopronouns. Though before that, just a quick content warning for both transmisia and true scummery. If you like our work and appreciate the research put into each video, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon. You can also support us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and today we'll be talking about xenogenders, what they are, and how they're not at all that peculiar when we actually stop and compare them to how we've constructed the classical genders, i.e. men and women. Hopefully this video can act as the catalyst for productive and compassionate discussion surrounding said topic. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's define some key terms, starting with what a xenogender actually is. Xenogenders are a subset of non-binary genders that, as originally defined by trans Tumblr user Baphomet, quote, cannot be contained by human understandings of gender, more concerned with crafting other methods of gender categorization and hierarchy, such as those relating to animals, plants, or other creatures/things, end quote. Indeed, the xeno in xenogender stands for alien, as in that which is unfamiliar. Said term appeared on a list compiled by Baphomet that was intended to help those who had been previously lumped in with agender folk, yet personally didn't feel that the label fit. That is to say, they didn't lack gender, they simply lacked the labels to accurately describe how they perceived said gender. There's a whole list of said terms, including egender, ungender, subgender, and necrogender, that I suggest checking out if this sort of linguistic anthropology interests you. Focusing down on xenogender, I've noticed that most of the people subscribing to said label can be divided into two general subcategories. First, we have those who perceive their gender as completely beyond human description, and that any attempt to convey said experience would ultimately be a display in futility. This is different from, say, agender, in that the person still has a sense of gender, a sense of xenine as opposed to masculine or feminine, they just don't know what to make of it or how to express it to others. As a result, these people often strictly refer to themselves as xenogender and use some variant of gender-neutral pronouns such as they, them, or it, its. But we also have those who, as mentioned in Baphomet's original definition, seek to associate their gender with another entity, whether real or fictional. Pretty much anything, so long as it's not defined by a relationship to either masculine or feminine. Which is interesting, considering the fact that this subcategory of xenogenders shares overlap with another term Baphomet came up with, and that is preterbinary, a gender that is, quote, beyond the gender binary/spectrum of male and female, end quote. This is completely normal for identities and labels, by the way. Overlap happens all the time, just look at bisexual and pansexual. To some people there's a degree of nuance, others not so much, and that's perfectly fine. This is not a gotcha moment, it's just me acknowledging the way labels are used and constructed. Returning to the second form of xenogender, said entity is often selected to try and help an individual convey some semblance of meaning to other people, typically based on shared cultural understanding, what is also known as a signifier. For example, a person who feels their gender embodies qualities of toughness yet clarity might associate with gemstones. Meanwhile, an individual who feels their gender embodies both growth and greenery might associate with trees or other items of that nature. Do pardon the pun. Said xenogenders might then go on to be classed as their own neogender, that is, new gender, such as gemgender and dryad gender, still remaining xenogenders in their own right, as well as non-binary genders, but now forming their own distinct gender as an extension. See what I mean about that overlap? Talking about neogenders, that leads on rather nicely to neopronouns, so new pronouns. For you see, while some xenogender folks stick with more traditional gender-neutral pronouns, such as the they singular of Shakespeare, others create neopronouns specifically related to whichever entity they associate their gender with. Returning to our previous examples, someone who associates with gems might go by gem, gems, gemself, while someone who associates with trees might go by tree, trees, treeself. Now, this is usually the point in which someone demands to know how they're supposed to learn the pronouns of every single gender, when spoiler, you're not. You are not expected to remember every neogender and their corresponding pronouns, since there are, theoretically, infinite variations. Therefore, it's best to think of neopronouns as a second name, which you should be doing anyway, seeing as this is the origin of the word pronoun. The Latin word for pronoun, pronomen, is made up of the word pro, meaning instead of, and nomen, meaning name. So quite literally, instead of name. Once we acknowledge that, we can understand how, in the same way that, say, a small village doctor is expected to learn the names of all their patients, you are only expected to learn the neopronouns of the people you interact with as you go about your business. Now, there's a lot of simple tricks you can use to help yourself with this. For example, if you're in any sort of official capacity and have a register or file for the person in question, just write down their pronouns at the top of said form or next to their name. If you're unaware of what they are, just ask and they'll be happy to tell you. Also, and this is general advice that can be applied to interacting with all trans people, don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake. Yes, you should strive to avoid misgendering someone, but trans people are not going to bite your head off if you make a mistake, so long as it's genuine. And believe me, trans people are very good at figuring out when it was an accident versus when it was deliberate. So long as you strive to make an effort, we're typically aware of that and are very understanding. If you make a mistake, the best thing to do is apologize briefly, correct yourself, and move on. We don't need grand displays of you talking about how bad you feel, and we certainly don't need you talking about how difficult it is for you to remember. Reason being, whilst you might have the best intentions in trying to convey that it was an accident, you belaboring your mistake and talking about how difficult it is for you to adjust can actually make trans people feel like their very existence is a problem, that we're a burden. So again, just apologize, correct course, and move on. Which brings us to the meat of this topic, what spurred me to make this video, and that's a hypocrisy I see every day when people holding to the classical genders, so male and female, talk about how ridiculous they find xenogenders. You might hear claims that said genders have no scientific basis or biological merit, that it's just someone making stuff up and slapping it on to how they feel. There's just one major problem with that. The exact same thing is true with regards to the classical genders. Men and women, predominantly cis men and women, have spent literal millennia dividing everything into either masculine or feminine. Colours, professions, emotions, planets, clothes, sports, movies, television, tastes and alcohol, nothing is safe. Hell, there are people who genuinely perceive cats as the feminine equivalent to dogs and vice versa. These are all things that have absolutely no corresponding relation to a person's biology, yet they have taken on deep cultural significance. Yet the moment a xenogender person comes along and points to one thing, one single thing, that helps them convey their sense of xenine, their gender, suddenly it's too much. Men and women have carved our world in two and divided the spoils between them, only to get pissy at xenogender folk for daring to borrow a single thing. Does that sound rational to you? Because it sure as hell doesn't to me. Oh, well it's different. Xenogenders quite literally define their gender by random things like planets. You'd never catch us, the normal genders, TM, doing that. Oh really? May I present to you the Roman symbols for Mars and Venus. Or, as they're more commonly known today, the visual signifiers for men and women. This is blatant hypocrisy on part of those who act like Xenogenders are doing some weird and new thing, when all they're actually doing is copying what the classical genders have done historically. The only difference is, we're taught to perceive these symbols surrounding male and female to be normal and even intrinsic, whilst Xenogenders are offered no such respect. The knee-jerk reaction, and that's emphasis on the jerk, seen regarding Xenogenders is not dissimilar to bigotry towards Sapphism and Achilleanism. The only reason love between people of the same gender is viewed as abnormal is because people have, for the longest time, been raised to only perceive love between a man and a woman as normal, legitimizing it while simultaneously discrediting other forms of love. Of course, love between people of the same gender is no less love because it's between people of the same gender, and I would argue much the same for the validity of xenogender people. Xenogender folk turning to symbols to help express who they are is no weirder than when people subscribing to the classical genders do it. It's just them continuing to do what people have always done, build upon shared signifiers in new and meaningful ways whenever they can. An act I can only describe as beautiful. So how dare people of classical genders act superior in their adherence to said genders, effectively punishing anyone who tries to develop their own meaning with respect to their gender? You're not superior, not even close. In fact, if anything, a lot of the people who adhere to classical genders are reprehensible in said gender due to how toxic they are going about it. Allow me to explain. On the one hand, we have xenogender folk, people who select one thing as a symbol to help them express their perception of their own gender. On the other hand, we have the classical genders, two groups who not only divided everything they can along gender lines, blue versus pink, war versus love, beer versus fruity drinks that actually taste nice, but have historically punished anyone who transgressed said arbitrary lines. Think of all the bullying and abuse targeted at men and women, boys and girls, because their own understanding of masculine and feminine didn't line up with what society tried to dictate down to them. Now, thankfully, we as a society are starting to question this, but we've got a long way to go before we fix things. And yet, I have never had a xenogender person try to police me that way. When a xenogender person tells you who they are, it's not about controlling anyone else, it is self-expression in the purest form. It tells you about them and them alone. Xenogender people have nothing to prove to us. We have everything to prove to them in showing how we've grown beyond our terrible history. To quote A Knight's Tale, a really underappreciated movie,
"For he is like gold to me. He is like gold, and you and I are merely iron. And yet you people, you would come to see him rust. For shame. Shame on you."
The human brain is a near infinitely complex machine that has a desire to express in order to be heard. That's what life is. Our mind is like an island we're stranded on, leading us to send up smoke signals in an attempt to reach out, to try and communicate with others, just so we don't feel so alone. Through whatever means, and for better or worse, gender has become a very important part of that communication beyond reproductive capacity. It helps us find our place in the universe to set a course, and I think that is something which should be celebrated. That's all I wanted to say. Though, what do you think? Did this video give you a new appreciation for Xenogenders, and if so, how? What other hypocrisies have you noticed when it comes to classical genders and how they treat others? Are there any other topics you'd like us to tackle? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help out, please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make our work possible. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Gert Van Vorst, Marblewings, Sosh Daniels, Flynn, and Higgins the Seagull. And for myself, Adita, and Levi, take care now.